Hello everyone, this is Nambernan, and today we'll be doing a video talking about the new progression in Psychic that has been made between me and WinCon and a couple of other people as well. So, as you know, or as most of you probably know, Psychic is chronically known as one of the worst types in Gen 9 Monotype. Which isn't very shocking when you learn that Psychic doesn't have a majority of its powerful Pokemon available to it, especially in this generation. But along with it just not having some of its good Pokemon, you have to also keep in mind that Psychic also just lacks, or doesn't lack, but also just is weak to Dark and Ghost, who both just so happen to be very good in the meta at the moment. And is also why Hoopa is one of the best Pokemon on Psychic at the moment as well, because it helps deal with both of those types, but it can only do so much to help it. Which is why it is in the spot it is in right now. Because every type is accidentally prepared for it, because most types will either spam a Dark type or a Ghost type. That has Shadow Ball to deal with other Ghost types, or Dark Stab to deal with Ghost types. And just having that prep in general just makes you also prepped to deal with Psychic as well. So it's a little unfortunate, but Psychic can still do stuff, is the thing. And I decided that I wanted to go take a look into Psychic, mainly because I wanted to help with the viability rankings of the type, but I also felt like there's just some unexplored potential. And I've talked about this before on this channel before, when I did the Psychic Hard Mode Challenge. And I did mention in that video that I thought that Bronzong may have been a bit underrated, and after some further testing, I have definitely come to the conclusion that Bronzong was definitely underrated. And I think, and I have a couple of teams to kind of show what I'm talking about. So, before we talk about any of these teams though, I want to shout out WinCon Z on Pokemon Showdown. Him and I have been trying really hard to figure out how to get this type to work. And it's been a very fun time trying to figure that out, to be honest with you. But we have done a lot of progress like trying to figure out this type, and I would say that where we have it right now, it's still definitely not great. But it's very similar to fighting in previous generations, I would say. Where it is not that great, but it has the Pokemon and it does have tools to actually deal with some of the top types. Just unlike fighting, it doesn't have like an automatically good matchup against any of the main types, besides maybe Dragon. But yeah, it doesn't have any default good matchups against any of the top tier types, which is very unfortunate. It's only good against fighting, but as we mentioned before, you can have Scrafty on fighting, and there's just a lot of other things that fighting can do this generation that makes it easier for Psychic to deal with, but depending on your Psychic build, those fighting teams can get worn down and destroyed. And speaking of those builds, let's start talking about them. So the first build I want to talk about is the Screens build. So Screens typically will use Deoxys Speed or Meowstic. I'll just start a new team just to make it easier to follow, but typically Deoxys Speed or Meowstic will be your screen setters. Obviously Meowstic male. And before, you wouldn't really use Meowstic male because Meowstic male was kind of not that necessary, due to the fact that you didn't really need prankster screens, because you didn't have Pokemon that were genuinely that fast that you need to prep for, because Deoxys Speed used to be like a really, like, you have to understand, this mon used to be genuinely one of the fastest Pokemon in the game. And there is just genuinely no reason to, like, 459 speed was not something that most, troublesome Pokemon, for Psychic specifically, would have trouble outspeeding. Also, this is definitely not it. This used to be 504. 504 was the, speed, but yeah. You didn't used to have to this was like a fine speed tier for our lead, and you would like generally be fine, but we have gotten to the point of power creep where we have Pokemon like Roaring Moon using Choice Scarf to deal with stuff like Fluttermane, and now it is also, by proxy, outspeeding Deoxys Speed, which is not good because it can actually also one-shot Deoxys Speed if it wants to. So yeah, that's not exactly ideal. So Meowstic actually does have a better niche now, due to this fact. Because it can actually get the screens off. It doesn't have to worry about getting one-shot by Deoxys Speed. Now, one of the things about Deoxys Speed that Meowstic still doesn't have is its access to Stealth Rocks and Spikes as well. So its access to these two moves makes it a far better lead than Meowstic, and it gives it way better utility as well. But as I mentioned before, Meowstic has the screens that it has access to, and it also can use... It can also use its Charm, and Charm is also completely unique to it. Deoxys Speed does not have access to Charm, and you might be asking, why do you want to use Charm when you're already using Reflect? Some Pokemon will try to take advantage of you. Like, for example, a Dragonite, or a different Swords Dancer, like a, I'm trying to think of another mod, but let's just say Dragon Dance, Dragapult, or Swords Dance Ogerpon, actually. Those Pokemon might want to stay in on you, or try to stay in on you, and they might not care about, like, getting paralyzed or something because they're very brave or something. But, yeah, you can just, negate that by giving them a Charm, and make it easier for any of your other Pokemon to switch in. It's very good against physical attackers, and at first I also questioned it, but it's not that bad. It's actually pretty decent, and it makes switching into things far, far easier for the rest of your Pokemon, which is ideal. Meowstic also has quite a few other useful utility moves that it has access to. I have to try doing stuff with all these moves eventually, like Gravity is a really good one that we could possibly make use of. The only issue is, obviously, switching out and having to use Gravity. The reason why it's good on Landorus is because you can immediately use it. Meowstic doesn't really have the opportunity to do that. Yawn is also a good move that has been used a bit by me and Wincon as well. And you already know about the rest of them, so yeah. This mod is pretty decent now due to Power Creep, which is actually really funny because Power Creep actually made this mod better on Psychic instead of making it worse, which is an unusual case, but I can't say that that's not something that hasn't happened before, especially in competitive Pokemon. But yeah. These are two screeners that you would typically use on screens teams, and the abusers on screens would be a wide variety of things. So you would have stuff like Iron Crown, for example. You would have stuff like Hatterin. You would have stuff like... let's just take a look at the psychic ones right now. There's a lot of stuff that you could use. You could use Iron Boulder as well. You could use certain Latios sets as well. There are some Metagross sets that you could use, although Metagross usually uses Stealth Rock, so it's not always there. Reuniclus, also another one. Necrozma is also another one. But yeah, there's quite a few Pokemon that you can use, like any setup sweeper that you can think of. One setup sweeper that I've been trying to use is Iron Leaves. The issue with Iron Leaves is that it has 4 move slot syndrome. And you might be thinking, what do you mean? It has all the moves that it would want, though. Not exactly. So the thing is, on Iron Leaves you absolutely want to have Swords Dance, because without Swords Dance you just don't do enough damage, despite having 130 attack. It's just not enough. So you want Swords Dance to boost your power, and you want to have, obviously, your Stab, which is Leaf Blade, because it's unique to your type, or it's unique to Psychic, so you want to try and have access to that. But you also might want to have dual stabs, you might want to use your Side Blade as well. Only issue is that Psyblade, for whatever reason, just like Surge Surfer, only works during electric terrain instead of working on all terrains. Now, this one at least makes a little bit more sense because all the iron Pokemon typically tend to be boosted. Their Quark Drive is boosted by electric terrain, so this one makes a little bit more sense. Surge Surfer still doesn't make sense at all, but regardless, this doesn't work with Psychic Terrain, which is very unfortunate for Psychic. Because if it got that boost, it would actually probably be one of the best terrain attackers on a type. But sadly, we do not live in that world. It's still boosted by terrain, but it's not as boosted as it should be. 1.5 times power compared to 1.2 or 1.3 times power is a significant difference. And it'll also just get boosted again by regular Psychic Terrain, so yeah, unfortunate. But yeah, you want to use close combat as well so you don't get walled by steel types, and then because flying is so prevalent in the meta, you also, well, not this move, you want Wild Charge. But as I said before, you probably also want to use your main stab move, so, and you also might want to use Throat Chop so you can deal with ghost types. There's just a lot of moves that you really want on this Pokemon. And on top of this, you might feel like you're too slow, so you might want to use Agility too, although I'm going to be honest, 346 speed is pretty good for the most part. It's just slower than Ogerpon, but I still think it's good enough. But yeah, I still have yet to get a successful team with Iron Leaves as of yet. But yeah, Heteran, Iron Crown are also, well, you already know this sets with Iron Crown. Just make this a bit easier. Yeah, this set with the weakness policy, and then Heteran can use like a couple of different sets. It can use this Nuzzle set, or it can use a Charm set as well. Charm doing the exact same thing I said about Meowstic, although this one's a bit more dubious than Meowstic because I don't feel like because these are typically run on a non-lefties Heterans, which I don't really think I approve of too much. At least me personally, but I have seen it do well, so I can't say I'm that against it. That being said though, those are typically the abusers, and obviously Latios, specific Latios sets can work on it, and Combined Latios also works well with it. But yeah, that's what you would do with screens. So now I already hear you wondering, so if you don't use Deoxys Speed, how are you supposed to get hazards up? Because hazards are like very important. Everyone on ladder uses Sash. Like, I have to do something about that, right? And you can. And that's where the main discovery that I made with this type came into play. And I can't really say I single-handedly did this because I do have to credit Black Matt for helping me see the light with this Pokemon, but Bronzong solves a lot of the issues that a lot of modern Psychic teams have. So here is the thing with a lot of modern Psychic teams. Before we start talking about the other archetype Psychic teams, this is actually very important to get out of the way first. So Bronzong is unique in its ability in that it is a, let's just clear all of these Pokemon real quick. It is unique in its ability that is a defensive steel that is also immune to Earthquake. Now, the reason why this is important is because a lot of Psychic teams are very bad against ground teams, specifically Sand Ground, due to the fact that Excadrill can just, at any point, Hippowdon can just come in, use a Jex button on any of your moves, and then Excadrill just gets 3 turns where it just one-shots literally any of your Pokemon. And it's really, really bad. So your best way of dealing with it is to either have a flying type or to have a levitator, because Psychic just doesn't really have a lot of consistent answers. So Latios would typically be your best bet, but Latios gets worn down very easily by Iron Head, or God forbid they have X-Scissor. If they have X-Scissor and you aren't prepared for that, yeah, that game is over. So Bronzong is unique in its ability to be able to deal with that very easily, because it has Levitate, which doesn't go away, and you can't pop it like an air balloon for the other two mons here, like Metagross and Jirachi. Bronzong can consistently come into Excadrill Earthquake, and it can take Iron Head, and it can take X-Scissor if it even does come up. Not that that's super common, but if it does come up, you can still take it. And on top of all this, it walls it, and it also threatens it out with a Body Press. You can do it with Body Press and Earthquake, but typically you will use Body Press most of the time. But yeah. But I already hear you say, what else does Bronzong do besides check Excadrill? Because I'm sure there's a lot of other Pokemon that could check Excadrill. Well, first of all, that's not true. There actually are still very few Pokemon that can check Excadrill. But it does do something else as well. It also can set Stealth Rocks. And if you have used Tentacruel on Poison or Water before, you already see where this is going. Bronzong can do Roll Compression extremely well. And Roll Compression on a type like Psychic that already struggles to have everything that it wants on the team, they appreciate Pokemon like this immensely. Because Bronzong being able to Roll Compress both hazards and being a check to Excadrill is just, it allows it to fit onto so many different archetypes of teams, it's actually insane. And it does it better than Metagross and Jirachi due to the fact that it checks Excadrill, as I said before. It may not be as powerful as these two. These two still do other things that Bronzong can't do, like Jirachi's utility move pool is a lot better because it has access to Thunder Wave, and also has access to Wish and a pivoting move and U-turn. And Excadrill is or not Excadrill, Metagross is a lot more powerful. It has access to knockoff as well. Also has access to a bunch of other more physical moves, and it's also just generally more threatening than Bronzong with its 135 attack stat compared to Bronzong's 89. But, as I said before, these two Pokemon are affected by Earthquake and can get one-shot by Excadrill. So, Bronzong can come into Excadrill consistently and get Stealth Rock off, which allows you to do a lot more with your team. For example, if you are making a Screens team and you decide that you want to use Meowstic instead of Deoxys Speed, guess what? You can do that now. You can use Meowstic, and you don't have to worry about having to, not having rocks, because you will have access to rocks at any time with Bronzong. And then you can just fit whatever breakers you want and not have to worry about it at all. You don't have to basically be solely dependent on Hedron bouncing back rocks. You will just have access to it, which is a commodity that just is not very common, because for whatever reason, Iron Boulder does not learn Stealth Rocks at all, despite the fact that Terrakion and the mon that it's based on learns it. But yeah. This was a massive change in the development of Psychic teams, because before you had to choose between having Stealth Rock or using a utility Pokemon like Meowstic or Deoxys Speed. But now you don't have to decide. You can just use Meowstic or Deoxys Speed, and then you can have Bronzong as well. And honestly, even without Stealth Rock, Bronzong is still just good as a Excadrill check, and it can become like a slight threat with Iron Defense and Body Press. But it will, for the most part, be used as Roll Compression, and it's very, very good at that. So now with that out of the way, let's talk about the other type of team that you can make, which would be terrain teams. So terrain teams are basically a significantly less thought-provoking version of Psychic teams, and they all spawn around the use of Indeedee, this Pokemon specifically. So Indeedee has Psychic Surge, spawns Psychic Terrain, very good, and in this generation specifically, because the Tapus aren't in this generation, Terrain Extender is legal. this is completely unique to SV, because in SS and SM, we constantly had Terrain Extender banned because Tapu Lele and Tapu Koko would abuse it, and 8 turns of terrain with those 2 Pokemon and their teammates was too much. But terrain, if you think about the types of terrain at the moment right now, it's just Electric, Grass, and Psychic. All 3 of those types are considered low tier, and none of them are giga problematic with Terrain Extender active. So, because of that, Terrain Extender is legal. And that allows all of those types, not just Psychic, but all of those types are able to abuse some form of terrain Pokemon synergy. So, one of the big things about Psychic Terrain was that Expanding Force is a move that does a lot of damage. So we'll just use Armor Rogue as an example. But Expanding Force, it gets 1.5 times power, and it still gets the boost from Psychic Terrain as well. So it goes up to 156 base power, nearly doubling its overall power once it's in Psychic Terrain. This is an incredible boost of power. This is basically like almost a Nasty Plot level boost in power. Like, that's how ridiculously strong this is. So, and that's before factoring stab, might I add. So this is an incredibly powerful move that's definitely worth building around, because certain types, certain offensive types, straight up cannot deal with the Psychic Spam, because Psychic Spam used to be a very popular strategy back in like Gen 5, Gen 6. That got a little less popular with the further popularization of offensive ghost types and dark types. But you can still somewhat make it work now. It's just that you have to find ways to deal with the dark types that will wall you. And that's why I still think that this form of team style is significantly more risky and very matchup dependent. It's kind of like running Rain on the ladder, where you will just outright destroy some types, but there's other types where you have to like try a little bit harder, and you might just not win because you're just not fully equipped to deal with it. It's a kind of matchup fishy, but it's not exactly the most matchup fishy thing. You can still somewhat build around it. So a typical terrain team would be like Indeedee, Armor Rogue, or not even Armor Rogue, but yeah, you would want to have Indeedee, and Indeedee is just your main mon. Funnily enough, Bronzong is also popular. See, I told you this is why we had to talk about him before. Bronzong will be your Stealth Rocker and your Check the Excadrill. Then we have stuff like Latios, Hoopa, and Iron Boulder as well. Indeedee, and also Gardevoir, actually. Gardevoir is actually a Pokemon I want to talk about specifically, because Gardevoir on terrain teams specifically, especially because of the Black Mat team that I mentioned before, Gardevoir is one of the few Pokemon on Psychic, specifically on terrain teams, that can actually beat Swift Swimmers and Sand Rushers. So if you're dealing with Excadrill, for example, and for some reason your Bronzong is dead because you did something absolutely dreadful, and believe me, I've done that before, Gardevoir can actually check Excadrill offensively if it comes into it with Trace. Because it'll copy Sandrush, and with a Choice Scarf, it will outspeed Excadrill every single time and threaten it with Focus Blast. Very similar thing will happen with Barraskewda on Rain. Barraskewda only hits 405, Gardevoir hits 421 with a Choice Scarf. Basically making sure that, and I'm pretty sure most Barraskewdas are animate anyway, but even if it was Jolly, you still completely outspeed it, so you don't even have to worry about it. And you will just one-shot it with Psychic Terrain boosted Expanding Force. So yeah, this Pokemon I think is a little bit underrated, but it's very specific for Psychic Terrain teams. It's not very good on more standard balance teams, which most people use at the moment, and screens teams it's definitely not good on at all, I would say. But as a terrain mod, it's very, very good. So currently, the main issue with terrain teams is, besides the fact that it's matchup fishy, it also just lacks very good pivots. Your best pivot right now is Hoopa, and Hoopa lacks U-turn, among other things as well. Hoopa is a very overstated Pokemon in general. We're talking about a Pokemon with 160, 170 offenses, and somehow it's still like middling in its power in its ability to actually like break through types, which is insane. But I guess that's just Gen 9 for you. But yeah, Hoopa fits onto these team types very well because it allows you to have a ghost type switch in. Other options also include Meloetta and a couple of others as well. Another thing with in DD is that typically on terrain teams you don't want to use Hatterene, but there are some situations where you do. So if you do want to use Hatterene, what I've found is very helpful is you could use a Psychic Seed. You can use a Psychic Seed, which allows you to boost your special defense and run a physically defensive set. And it essentially makes you Giga bulky in both sides of the defensive spectrum, which is very handy. And you might be asking, well, why do you need a Psychic Seed specifically for Hatterene? It is so you can deal with Poltergeist and Knockoff at the same time. Because not taking the boosted damage from Knockoff allows you to avoid a bunch of 2-hit KOs, and allows you to sit comfortably in front of a lot of Pokemon that you normally wouldn't be able to sit comfortably in front of, like Roaring Moon, for example. And even though Roaring Moon still like threatens you greatly with Iron Head, this helps you deal with just the random Roaring Moon knockoff spam, because knockoff spam against a team like this would do great work, typically. But you could actually somewhat punish it with something like Hatterene. Along with this, you can also stop Poltergeist, as I mentioned before, so Ceruledge would be forced to use only Shadow Stick against you, and guess what? You have Psychic Terrain, so now it suddenly just doesn't have any Ghost Stab that it can use against you. Which is very good in the Ghost matchup, and also against Fire, which is a very, very meta type right now. So yeah, being able to just straight up remove Ceruledge's ability to play the game against your type is very handy. And along with that, Hatterene can also just set up a lot easier with Calm Mind. Not having leftovers is very sad, but having the Psychic Seed actually does help a ton in making sure that you don't just get destroyed by other Pokemon. Now you can still use regular leftovers on a terrain team, but you'll just find that you will be a lot less useful with your Hatterene. So I think this is the best way to run it on a terrain team, assuming you even want to run it. I think that there are better teams to do it with, or better Pokemon to do it with, but yeah. That is a general explanation of the stuff we have found on Psychic. Sadly, I don't have any replays because this account is kind of in Gigalow right now, because I've been trying to experiment a ton with this type, specifically with this team that has not done me any favors right now. But I will guide you through a couple of my teams that I think have potential. Oh, I forgot to talk about one last Pokemon, so let's just go here. So one last Pokemon I want to talk about. This is a very, very, like literally yesterday recent. I have recently discovered Delphox. So Delphox with a very specific set has, solves one of the few issues that Psychic has, which is a lack of really good pivots. Jirachi is one of the best pivots that Psychic has access to, but it kind of just doesn't work well with a lot of the Psychic's best mons. And it also just isn't strong enough as a pivot. Because offensively, it's not strong enough because it has 100 offenses, and defensively, it doesn't have recovery, and it also just doesn't do enough defensively to really be worth using U-turn on. And again, it's weak to Excadrill, so that's never good. So Delphox here is actually able to be a pivot with the Eject Pack and Overheat. So, and pair this with Magician, and suddenly you have a Pokemon that can be very, very annoying to specific teams. Specifically those that are heavily reliant on choice items or any other type of items. So this is actually very funny because Knockoff So the thing with Delphox is that once you use Eject Back, you don't become useless because you can come back in with Magician and steal the item from the enemy Pokemon. So imagine you're up against a Dragon team, you decide to use Overheat to switch out, you come back, they put in Hisuian Goodra, and now you take away their leftovers. Suddenly their Hisuian Goodra is way easier to take down now. Similar events can happen to other Pokemon. You can also just take away choice items. Stuff like Roaring Moon's Choice Scarf could be very ideal to take away, for example. And you can also do a lot of other stuff as well. But yeah. Delphox, right now the set for Delphox is really set in stone. So far I have an Overheat set with Focus Blast and Psychic Stab as my main options, but as I keep going with the Psychic Discovery, I'm going to try and figure out what's best for this type. But yeah, that's the only other development that I've made. It also is just a slightly faster version of Armorogue, which is good because Armorogue at the moment is a bit too slow and it requires too much time to get going. But yeah, let's move back on to the second teams I was going to show you. And like I said before, no replays this time around, so it's kind of just going to be a little bit of a boring video, but I will try to get replays next time. But here is the most recent team I've been using. So as you can see, I've been trying to mix together Psychic Terrain and Screens on this team. And this is the best of both worlds that I can get, because I can set up Screens, which allows Iron Boulder and Armorogue to do well, as well as Hatterene. And if I decide to choose to use Indeedee, I can just use the Choice Scarf set and still use the very powerful Expanding Force to do a lot of damage, but also still proc the Second Seed for Hatterene, which will help it immensely. Now, this Bronzong set, I don't really like that much. I think I'm going to change to Physically Defensive and put Stealth Rock on it, but yeah. This was also another team that I decided to use, using Deoxys Speed, but I ended up dropping Deoxys Speed, and I also ended up dropping Iron Leaves because Iron Leaves wasn't doing enough for me, and Deoxys Speed was getting outpaced. And this was a very interesting team, so I wanted to try and do this concept with Reuniclus, because Reuniclus is actually used to be one of the size spamming Pokemon that we talked about, and the issue with this Pokemon is that, once again, it typically just tends to fall over. It does have 110 HP, which is very good, but it does fall over to any stray special hit. So Psychic Seed would remedy that, but the issue is that even though it has recovery and these high stats, it doesn't threaten enough, which is very sad. It actually just does not do enough damage to actually be a really good threat with a defensive spread like this. And you will just be better, even with Magic Guard allowing you to not get worn down by stuff like Toxic. You might as well just use Hatterene instead. just because you aren't able to get like phased out by stuff like a Dragon Tail, or get moves by Whirlwind or Roar. That alone actually makes a significant difference in whether or not Reuniclus can be useful, because it is still decent, but Hatterene will just outclass it due to the fact that it can do that and just be immune to phasing and hazing. So yeah, very unfortunate, but I do think that thing still has a niche. It just, you know, it just needs to not be up against the phaser. And this is the most recent version of the team that I've been making. This has Expanding Force and Focus Blast. I still don't know what item to use on Iron Boulder yet. I do think that Sword Stance is definitely the best way to use it though, since Choice Scarf just doesn't do anything useful for the type right now, besides outspeed Roaring Moon and Oko it. And in DD still does its job here, as well as Miastic. This team is requiring me to have a lot more practice though, because I have 2 threats on the team. And DD's not really like that huge of a threat, and Delphox is like sort of half utility, half threat. It's kind of like a prankster Pokemon, honestly. It's just meant to be a nuisance. And then yeah, Bronzong here, still doing its thing. So yeah, I hope that I get some good replays with these teams eventually, once I get the scout out of the gutter. Because currently it's in the 1300s, I need to get it out of there immediately, so I'm going to be spamming Dragon for a bit. But hopefully I will get some good replays to show you guys in the future. But yes, this is currently the development we have made with Psychic. Again, a lot of this stuff I owe to Wincon. He helped me see and realize how good Bronzong really truly was. Because even though Black Knight did show me the light initially, when I realized that Excadrill is just that problematic for Psychic, I learned just how important Bronzong truly was, and how important its roll compression was, and what exactly it could be roll compressing for. Because a lot of the teams that I just showed you would not work well if it wasn't for Bronzong, because they would still lose to Excadrill. But yeah, there's still definitely a lot of work that needs to be done with the type. I don't think we're close to fully figuring it out yet, but sooner or later we will come up with a very ideal version of the type. But yeah, that's where we are right now. Hold on. Sorry about that. That's where we are right now, and I will see you guys in the next video. It will not be the L-Trank interview, by the way. That will probably take another week. So just expect another fun video coming out in the near future. But yeah, I'll see you guys then.